Hello, welcome to week 1 of REL 4000 Christian Life and Ministry. This week is really going to serve as an introduction to us. First, an introduction to 3 of the 4 books that we're going to be using throughout the course, and then an introduction to some of the ideas of what we're going to be talking about throughout the course. So I just wanted to give you a couple of introductions to each of those books, and then also a little bit of a preview of some of the things that we're going to be looking at this semester. The first book that we are going to look at is called Sacred Rhythms by Ruth Haley Barton. And this book walks us through some of the classical spiritual disciplines or practices. For many of us, practices are really hard. We know that there's something about them, something that tells us in the Christian life that we are supposed to engage in these things, but that doesn't mean that it's easy to do. Some people are really disciplined, some people are not. But my hope is that as we go through this course, that there will be disciplines that you read about in this book that will inspire you to try on some practices that you haven't done before. I did want to say a word about the practices. One of the things that is challenging about the Christian life is that we do things like read the Bible, pray, participate in worship, practice the Sabbath, because we often think that it is these things that makes us Christian. And I want to be really upfront to say these are not things that make us Christian. But what they are is that they are things that put us into places and positions where God can be at work in our lives. So the act of praying does not make me a Christian, but what it does is that when I'm praying, it is a way in which I'm opening myself up to the work of God. This week, the question that we're really going to ask in regards to spiritual practices is, what are the things that you long for in your spiritual life? For me, I would like to be a disciplined person. I'm not a very good one, but a person who regularly engages in the reading of Scripture, in praying, and in service. Those things do not all come naturally to me. Those things are often things that I find hard to put into my life. But when I think about what is it that I want to do and be as a spiritual person, these are practices that I want to engage in. And so as you begin to think about spiritual practices, I want you to think about, what are the things that you want to engage in? What are practices that really speak to you? What are ways that you find that you are able to connect with God? The second book that we're going to be spending time with this semester is The Mockingbird Parables by Matt Litton. It's probably not the kind of book that you thought that you were going to read in a Christian life and ministry class, but what it does is it takes the book, To Kill a Mockingbird, that many of you have read, and really parallels it to our faith. What are things that we can learn about our faith journey through the characters that we see in To Kill a Mockingbird? And it takes those characters that are familiar to many of us and engages us in some different ways of understanding our faith and understanding God and understanding the way that our faith works and is lived out in this life. This week, we're really going to look at who God is. And so as we begin this journey together of what does it mean for me to be a Christian person and to live out my Christian faith, a lot of that begins with the question of, who is the God that I am called to love and to serve and to follow after? And that's what we're going to look at this week in the Mockingbird Parables. And the third book that we're going to look at this week is Compassion by Henry Nouwen. And I'm really excited about reading this book together because it is a book that is going to ask us some really hard questions. It is a book that is going to call us to question some of the things that we think, some of the values that are central to who we are, and to ask, how does the way that I look at the world, the way that I look at my neighbor, how does that line up with what we see in Scripture and what we're called to? What we're going to read this week in Nouwen is really asking the question about who God is. If our Christian life begins with God, what do we find out about who God is that shows us the way that we are called to live and to be in this world? I think there are a lot of questions that are going to come up this week, and they are not all questions that we'll be able to answer this week, but questions that begin us to discover some things together over our journey in this course. I look forward to engaging with you in some of the questions that are asked in the discussion section and really beginning to think together about what the Christian life looks like. I look forward to this week together.